Okay, so why are these trends key? We were thinking about as we thought about kind of mixing up our usual key trends here, how we can take a look at it, take a step back and think about websites as a whole and why they're so effective, particularly in economic development. Here we go. Let's see if I can. You know what, Aaron? I'm going to let you move us forward. There we go. Okay.
All right, I'm on it.
So Okay, so we know that certainly we want to pick things when we were looking at them, things that give you a competitive advantage by having them on your website. Next, we really wanted to account for the fact that web visitors are very sophisticated these days. And if you've got a website that doesn't load quickly, that doesn't load properly, that's out of date, that doesn't offer them a level of interactivity or a reason to return, you're probably going to lose some of them. Next, we understand, particularly in economic development, how important it is to give your website visitors what they need, which is very often data. This is what helps them make decisions, whether they're expanding, relocating, whether you're talking about workforce, reskilling, retention, whether you're looking to develop partnerships or collaboration with other organizations, data is key.
Mhm.
And then also, it's so important that your website is really the first impression, is the public face of your region, of your community, of your organization, of the people who work there. So making sure that your website is really on point here is absolutely critical. We know how important first impressions are. And if you aren't hitting those points, then you could leave people with the wrong impression or a bad taste. And finally, I guess there's that trust and credibility piece. It's not like you're marketing a sports energy drink here. This is about a location, it's about a region, it's about a community. Often there's a government element or connection as well. When we're talking about business and multi-million dollar investment or people trying to attract workforce, having all your materials in place, making sure they're correct, that they're up to date, and they're easy to access is really important because this is how decisions are made.
Yep.
Adaptability. So we talked about being up to date, of course. So that element of adaptability is super important because this is how people are going to make the decisions that they've got, and we need to make sure that you are easily able to quickly update your website as needed.
Yep.
Engagement, critical. So we know the interactivity, recognizing that people want to be able to share things. So making it easy to share links, share articles, share, any video content or images or maps that you might have, important as well. And then finally, the last piece we have here is the global reach. You are going to be talking to potential investors and workers from everywhere. So looking at all kinds of different things from translation options, making things accessible, avoiding, a ton of jargon. That is really important. And some of the other things that we're going to look at account for the fact that people may be trying to reach you outside of office hours.
All right. Well, let's start with number 10, value propositions.
So value propositions is really about the why. And a lot of the work that I've been doing since I launched my own digital marketing strategy consulting practice is to go back to the economic development organizations that I've been working with for years and help them understand what their why is. You cannot be all things to all people. We like to think that we can. And of course, we like the idea that investors might come from anywhere. But you really do need to have a very sophisticated understanding of what your why actually is. And that's where value proposition comes into place. So the next part is understanding, what does that mean? What is a value proposition? So your value proposition is really a concise and engaging explanation of what is strategic, functional, and emotional in terms of benefits for your region to investors and businesses. And that value proposition is really important because it's not just who you are and what you do differently. That's your positioning, but it's really the heart of what you offer. And it's where you can get a lot of the great content that you're going to be coming up with, how you solve the problem your website visitor has, and why they should choose you over the competition. So that is really critical because as you go on to put together your website, think about what your website should look like and what elements you should have on it, what your copy should look like, what pictures, what content you have in there. It's really understanding that in a very kind of granular way. So if we look at the next slide, you can see that when we talk about a value proposition, it's really understanding what the data has to say. So often that means going back and doing that research, that strategic plan that you probably or should have done for your organization is important. And you want to be able to draw from the data in there. And when I work with clients, I try to help them understand what is the data telling in terms of what you currently have to offer that differentiates and finding those strong hooks. So that usually what we try to do when I do this exercise with clients is to define what the three most important values are that are the basis of your brand. There may be more than three, that's fine. But let's just start with three because it's hard to argue all of the things all the time. The one that really jump out at you. And these three things should communicate your region's what, they should communicate your why, and also how. And this is important to do in a way that engages your audience. It should be interesting and exciting to them. It needs to be something you can explain clearly. It should resonate with them so that they want to stay and keep reading or watching more. It describes how you address any pain points they might have. And it's memorable. You want to make sure that when they walk away from your website, they still understand it.
Hmm.
And so the next slide kind of shows an example of a template that I'll often use in these value proposition definition exercises. And when you get the slides, which I'll share with you afterwards, you can go over and see how Reach Central Coast does this in California. So these are three brand values. You could just look at their website and right away you know what those are, that they're super connected, and that is something that you can define in different ways. So they're connected because they're central in terms of their location in the state, that there is stress-free transportation infrastructure available that keeps them connected and their businesses connected. And it is also spacious with room to breathe, this kind of California quality of life elements as well. The talented piece is important in terms of the education of their workforce, but it also means they've got proximity to universities. Thirdly, the last value that we look at, that jumps out at you right from their homepage, is that they're competitive in global markets, but they are also competitive in a couple of other ways as well. And so that's really important. This is embracing the brand values, understanding your value proposition, putting them front and center on your website and throughout your marketing.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. And I like to think that finding your value proposition, like you mentioned in the beginning, you can't be all things to all people. And for sure, choosing the things you are going to be is one of the hardest decisions that economic developers have, because that's ultimately where your dollars go. And towards that marketing, and it feels like you should be all things to all people, but making those decisions are the key part of the job. And part of all of this is your brand, and that becomes the value proposition. And the way we think about it at Golden Shovel is it's that brand is a feeling. It's how people feel about you, and the value of the brand is the value of the positive feelings that they have, or negative. Therefore, it's like you can control your brand, positive or negative, either way you have one, and it's how they feel about you. And I just wanted to note, even though we are absolutely talking about websites, every single point of contact, starting with the website, which is oftentimes the first impression for an organization or a prospect that's looking to move to your region. But really, every single point of contact affects that brand and affects how people feel about you. Even something as simple as how you answer the phone or how quickly you get back to somebody. If somebody sees you out in the public speaking, there's good press and there's bad press. All of this affects the brand.
So
But the
true.
website is the first impression, and as we know, first impressions are very outweighed when people have them. Let's put a couple examples of some websites with some strong first impressions.
Yeah, this is one that I wanted to add. It's sort of Invest in Canada, super interesting just because it's got like the who and why up front. And you often have that, people often have a section on their website is, why ourregion.com or whatever. And I just thought I love that the map was there. Not everybody necessarily knows where your communities. Do not assume that they will know, even if you think that it's a well-known place, to help people identify that. And then cutting right to, in this case, which is the central element of a trade organization like Invest in Canada, which is Vet FDI. So I thought that was a good example. And then I think we have
I
there you
put a
go.
couple in myself. One,
Yeah.
Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I have a couple examples of these guys in here. This is just phenomenal community as far as putting their brand out first and forward.
Yeah.
Um, Named the most livable small city in America. And if you get a chance to check out Advanced CT, this is the state of Connecticut's website. Not only do they do an excellent job of putting their value proposition forward, they also did a really great job of being highly specific on their industries that they're looking to attract. It's versus being, hey, we're a great place for everybody. It's like we're a really great place for these types of businesses, and then they've got the data and the stories to back it up. Um, this kind of ties in with the example that Elisa gave of the Macon and McMinn. They're the center of everything, and it's all about being the center of distribution and the center of innovation. They have a central location to a lot of metro areas, and they just put all of that up straight forward to make sure that what they're looking for is logistics and groups that are going to work within those types of regions.
I love that. Those are really good examples. And when you go to the homepage of many EDO websites, this is kind of the thing you should be looking at first and foremost, is can you see evidence of that value prop right there? So the next trend that we really wanted to look at, and this is one that we've had for a few years now, is really understanding storytelling, because this is how people understand things. And marketing ultimately is telling a story. And of course, your website is going to be the central piece in doing that. And the truth is that our brains are hardwired through evolution to understand things in a narrative format. And we know that when people tell stories, we're more likely to be interested in it, to be engaged by it. We're more likely to understand it. It's more likely to resonate with us because it'll stay with us for some time. And it's something that we're much more likely to remember than if we were just presented with disparate facts separately. So storytelling is really critical. And there's different things that storytelling will do for you. We know that it makes an emotional connection. And you might think about economic development. It's not emotional. What's emotional about industries or subsectors? But in fact, it is. And the emotional part is usually the people that are part of it, that start the businesses, that run the businesses, that work for the businesses, that are stakeholders in the community. And this is your opportunity to humanize in some different ways, really emphasizing connectedness of community is such a core part of our humanity. So that is something that people really respond to, and how people have built, fulfilling lives and careers there. The second element is differentiation, because, all communities are going to try and make themselves seem like the right place for any investment. So this is where you show off your value proposition and you kind of differentiate by showing what is unique to your area, your brand values, whether it's infrastructure, incentives, something that's collaborative, public-private partnerships, quality of life. You really want to be authentic to build trust. So this is important. And this is where, you might use humor, you might show things that are a little different or surprising, and you're building credibility and relatability when you have real stories about real people and doing that. Another great way to do that sometimes is user-generated content from workers or entrepreneurs, the people who live in your community. You also want to use your website and storytelling to persuade people to action, to drive decision making. You want them to make that appointment with you, to schedule the meeting, to come and view some of the things that your community has to offer, speak to businesses there. And we know that in this case, I've got this figure here that stories are remembered 22 times more than just facts alone. So this is a really important way to do that, to make connections with people. And that's where, again, that evoking emotions is a really interesting way to do that. So sharing the values through narrative is important. You want to pick the stories that are going to align with the investors. You know your target audiences, you have a sense of what they're looking for, and you really want to look for narratives that emphasize the things in your brand value. Now that might be innovation, it might be resilience, sustainability, diversity, whatever that actually is. This is your opportunity to make sure that you're getting that good fit with whoever's looking at your website.
Right. And for us, we do so much marketing and outreach for our clients, and it's all stories. I mean, you hit it on the not on the dot. It's like for us, we're trying to write a story where it's aspirational and relatable, so the person can sense that, hey, if I move to this community and I do something like that person's just said they were doing, like that seems like something I could actually do, and that would be an upgrade. Or if, wow, I'm in this industry, and if I move to this community, it looks like there's other companies that are in my industry that are succeeding and thriving. I could also take advantage of those, and it'd be a natural leg up. So those are the success stories when we're targeting a specific, whether it's businesses or people, but we're trying to make it aspirational, but it's definitely something you can do. Like, yes, that seems like could be a fit for me. And we're writing stories. It's going to be about, like, so we're doing interviews with CEOs, leading employers. These are the companies that are doing really, really wonderful. Here's why. Here's the programs they took advantage of. Here's the people in the area. Um, Here's why it's successful here versus another place is usually a big part of the story where you can really hit on your value proposition. Um, and how they're poised to grow. Oftentimes the stories are going to be around programs in schools where the talent is coming in to support them for growth in the future, or how they're engaged with the community in different ways that makes it something that's really special to that particular industry. And it's the kind of the same thing with talent attraction too, because here you're talking about the people that are thriving in the industry, like in your community. They love living there. That passion and that emotion is what makes a story memorable. And when someone's just saying, "Hey, I really love being here. Ever since I got here, things have been better for me. My life has been better." That's something that other people can feel that they might be able to experience themselves. And how we're using these stories. First of all, once again, I mentioned it's all of our marketing. So it's going out to the social media pieces, but ultimately they're the stories that are on the websites. And so if you have a business attraction, economic development site, you're going to have all the success stories about the types of businesses that you're trying to target there. And one of the reasons is when you reach out to the world and with this one specific story, and then they click on it and they come back to your website, you want to have more stories that support that and just make that even more true. Here's a couple examples. One East Kentucky was one that that we worked on for quite a while. They had all of these miners that were out of work and they needed to bring in some businesses and so we wrote a story that really focused on creating the aerospace region of Eastern Kentucky. The irony at the time was that there wasn't any aerospace companies in Eastern Kentucky. So in order to make that story authentic, we had to be able to tell the story both visually like this, where you could say, hey, look at all of these aerospace companies that are within a couple mile radius, even though they're not in our specific spot. And then put out stories to attract those. So we had things like, hey, 10 reasons why aerospace companies are landing in Eastern Kentucky, for example. And then they'd come back and they'd hear about some of these success stories. Here's an example one of Dutch Core Aluminum that came in there. They've had multiple success stories now and started to really build out their own cluster.
I love that. Yeah, those are really great examples. I love the idea of using visuals and data to do that. The map you just showed in Kentucky is such a fabulous example of that. Another example here from a data software company called Local Intel. This is something they built for Invest in Canada. They're in a lot of different places. This one's really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, because it quickly tells that story in a colorful way through data. You can see them at the graphs. You can see the chart on the bottom. You can also see the circles. And the other interesting thing in terms of website that I thought is this meets all of the very stringent compliance accessibility guidelines that the Canadian government required. So these tools are something you can use even if you have vision or mobility issues. So it's the WCAG 2.0 guidelines. So I thought that was kind of an interesting piece in telling that story. Another example of a story here, this is off the British Columbia Trade and Invest website, is telling the stories of the companies that are doing things in an interesting way. So, Indigenous seafood company finding new horizons in Japan. Well, that's different, a little bit unusual, and it's got some great keywords that are then going to be part of the appeal of the site and maybe a way that someone will find their way into that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And as we go through our 10 trends, you're going to see storytelling and the value proposition throughout. I believe it carries through in so many of the different areas. Now, ultimately, with the websites these days, especially for economic development organizations, they're no longer online digital brochures. They've got a very specific purpose, and it's to generate leads into the community. That's gotten very sophisticated from where it started. And we use you may have probably heard of the term, but of inbound marketing. So before 15 years ago, when we started all of this, there was a lot of just putting stuff out there and hoping that somebody would see it and come visit. But now, instead of just throwing stuff out there and hoping someone calls, When some you put out these stories, when people show interest, you can capture their interest and give them more information to what we would call nurture that particular lead. So here's a little example. Roy's the business owner. He reads this article on LinkedIn, lands on the website, and now that he's been on there, you know that he's already interested in manufacturing, because that's what the story was about originally. And so then we can give him more information and nurture that by introducing them to webinars, sending them ebooks, inviting them to maybe meet with some of the CEOs or some of the other programs that are there. And ultimately, you're nurturing it until that meeting gets set up. Once you know that those people are coming to visit and have this type of interest, then when you see them at a trade show or see them at one of the conferences, you can bring those leads over. And there's a perfect example of this is from HubSpot, who we've used quite a bit for inbound marketing. The stranger shows up, then they become a visitor, then they become a lead, and then they become a customer, then you promote them. So attract, convert, close, and delight. And this hits all the different areas of the marketing. The website's still at the center of this because that's where it's got all of the information that they need. But we're putting these stories out on social media. We still do a lot of newsletters. That's still been very effective. Podcasts have become more popular than ever. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a little bit. Webinars, as like this one, white papers and articles, and digital ads. And we'll be hitting on some of these more another theme that's one of the top 10 trends.
Actually, if we just want to go back to that slide for a second, Aaron, I think this is really kind of the essence of what I'm trying to impress on clients right now, is really to see all of your marketing as part of an ecosystem. Your website is a central core part of that, and the thing that we really need to be starting with. It's based on your value proposition, so you have good knowledge about your organization, your community, your brand values, and how you differentiate yourself. And then we want to make sure that we put together an ecosystem that is very well integrated. So what I try to do with clients is help them understand how that should be connected to their CRM, how they might want to use an inbound marketing platform like HubSpot, which I've helped a number of clients set up, so that is the single point of truth for all of the touches and all the works that they're going, that you can get the metrics, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And sometimes clients will be, maybe not a massive organization, and they're going to say, well, we don't have time to do all of these things. But really, strategy implies that we are doing this efficiently and effectively for your organization, whatever your organization is. So scaling it to your capacity and your capability. And we want to make sure you don't have to be on all the social media networks. You really, really do not have to be on all the. But if investment attraction is going to be really important to you, as it is to most of our ADO clients, then LinkedIn maybe is the one that you really want to focus most of your attention on. If you're thinking about workforce attraction or supporting and retaining small to medium-sized businesses, then maybe we want to add Facebook into the mix. But there's different ways to really be strategic and think about your time as a resource. We want to make sure that we are automating and facilitating your time, and that we're really helping you focus on the things that are most important. And sometimes when people think about lead generation, as you say, they still have this kind of old-fashioned idea that they're going to just put stuff out there and then, people will call. But the inbound is about drawing them back to that website, that core thing that you've spent a lot of time building, and making sure that it is fine-tuned to your needs. So all of these activities are about bringing them back there. And I do think this is really important. And if you go over to the next slide, I have kind of an example of how we think about content marketing for that. So one of the things that you have here, for example, is this idea of being authority and the authoritative, credible voice for your region, for the industries that you're representing. So I have an example here from another webinar that I did recently that is an example of content marketing, where we were talking about, in this case, priorities, that this is a way in which, by doing the webinar, such as we're doing here, we're able to capture that through a video that we can then leverage in a number of different ways on the website and off in marketing strategies that are going to bring people back to it. The other great thing about the content is it lets you expand your marketing database. So in the example that Aaron shared before with Roy, that if you have someone who's already shown interest because they read your LinkedIn article or they watched your webinar, they might come back to your website. And if you've gated your content, so they have to fill in a form to access something for free, that you're giving them, they've given you their name, their contact information, and you can then, depending the country you're in, if they have consented to that kind of marketing, you now have a database of people who are shown that they're interested. They're actively interested in learning more. That is so much more valuable than anything that you're going to buy or scrape out there. And also, we see that this content marketing is so important for SEO. There's technical SEO, and that's something that a website development company will help you implement. But the content SEO means that you need to have this authentic long form content, ideally at least one piece for each of your brand values. That is what Google is looking for in their secret sauce that will bring them back so that you will do well in the search rankings. So an example, if you click here, we did the webinar. How do we leverage this so that you're not spending tons of time on this? So in the webinar video, I was then able to go and use actually an AI tool that we can take a look at called Opus Clips that helped me find small clips within the longer video that I could then use on LinkedIn. So this is something that the tool helped me actually do. And that webinar video, which is still valuable to me because it lives on YouTube and it lives on my website, is something that is also now actively in these small little nuggets that are practical and useful to people, 19 seconds in this case, that someone might actually see on LinkedIn. Again, bring them back to the website. And the next slide is another example of that. So we talked about the article, again, in our friend Roy's example, is coming up with something that if you have a blog or a news release, you might want to also considering adding it to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really trying to prioritize their algorithm for these kinds of content within the tool. But it doesn't mean that you can't use content that you also have elsewhere. And this is again about you showing that thought leadership, drawing people back to the website itself, thinking about expanding your database and making sure that that visibility is there in terms of showing people what you can actually do.
You bet. Here's just an example of getting that content out to so many different ways and paths. Here it is on Vimeo, here it is on LinkedIn, here it is in the news. Um, all sorts of different ways to just catch people's eye. Like we noted before, LinkedIn is the strongest that we've experienced. Facebook's pretty decent with the talent attraction, but just making sure that you're present there and bringing everybody back to the website. I'm just going to give this an example. The Greater Yankton Living, this is a rural community in South Dakota that they were able to, through Facebook, get 19,530 followers. This is probably bigger now, but that's a lot. That's a really big asset. So if you have something important to say about what's going on living in your community or sharing that, that there's going to get a lot of reach out into the world.
So we did talk about the importance of tracking. That's so critical. If you are an economic development professional that is not in charge of marketing for your team, you really should still be taking an active interest in these things. Your Google Analytics are not just for the marketing team. Ask if they can give you access or ask if they can give you regular overviews, especially you want to look at acquisition. So who's coming to your website and where they're coming from, how long do they spend there, what are the typical entry pages, exit pages, what is your bounce rate, which means how long are they actually spending on your site before they leave. And also you want to think about what are the lead sources. So how do we get people to your website? That's really the opportunity. If you want to boost traffic, that's where you need to look. Now, your website developer may have provided you with internal analytics. That's something to look for as well. If you're using HubSpot or another inbound marketing platform that will help you integrate with the website, so all of this comes together and you can set up a dashboard with key metrics. So how is your email marketing doing? How many people clicked through on that email campaign and went to the website page you wanted them to see? Did you set up landing pages for an event or a webinar or a white paper download? How many people came? How many people clicked? Performance of digital ads and more. And then I know that you also have the ability of reverse IP lookup tools. I know Golden Shovel is something you guys built in. using something like lead forensics or lead feeder, that lets you not just see the numbers and the aggregate group information, but also the commercial you are, to understand the where people are actually coming from. So what companies are actually coming, landing, their IP address. So you'll be able to see if it was, Hertz in your county or your state, or maybe it was Hertz headquarters somewhere else, for example. That's actionable information. And, Aaron and I, we were talking about that kind of ecosystem and how you want to think about content creation, about CRM, and the inbound platforms, the social media marketing, pay-per-clicks, SEO, video marketing. The goal really is to kind of put something together that is very well integrated, that adjusts to what your team, or maybe you're just the only person there, what your workflow actually looks like. It is very possible to optimize. That's what you're going to want to be looking for so that you are able to meet the objectives that you're looking for and to do it with the minimal amount of friction.
Yep, absolutely. And this is a perfect tie-in to a newer trend that I think has been very, very successful, and that is being straight about education.
Yeah, and one of the things we were talking about when we were setting this up is why is education marketing? Well, personally, my background, I have a doctorate. My background was in university education. I was a professor for a number of years, and I found myself doing some consulting online and was approached by my former employer, it was GIS Planning, which later was acquired by the Financial Times, and they asked if I would come and do their marketing, and I said I don't do marketing. And they said to me, well, what we really like is how you take complex things and you make them accessible, interesting, and memorable. And that really resonated with me because I think in economic development, we often work with these complex, multifaceted concepts. So the goal in marketing is to take these things, make them really interesting, help people understand them, visualize them so that they can instantly engage and comprehend, the importance behind them, use case studies to tell those stories and ensure that they can remember it. And so one of the clients that I worked with this past year was Bermuda, their investment promotion agency, and this is a page from their a PDF that they had on captive insurance. Insurance is really a big deal in Bermuda. And so this kind of one page from this brochure very simply sets up something that is actually quite a complex topic when you're talking about captives. So thinking about education and marketing together may seem a little surprising, but I think it really makes sense.
Yep. Um, there's a book that I might be interested in. It's one of the top-selling business books, but it's called "They Ask You Answer." It was a big part of what Golden Shovel did. Gosh, almost 4 or 5 years now, where we started thinking, if we were full capacity and so was everyone else that does the work like we do, we still wouldn't be able to help enough people. So why not educate, tell people how we do what we're doing, and if they can do it on their own, great. If they need help, we're here. And that's the idea behind this book, because it builds the trust. And there's a lot of different ways, because an economic development organization needs to educate. I would say starting with the businesses in town. Are they aware of what the situations are, or the problems that are holding back some of the growth perhaps in a community, or why may or may not be able to attract talent? Board members, I'd have to say, oftentimes they're just not versed on the latest economic development trends. They're not going to the conferences. You need to be able to educate them. New talent, about educating them. Why is your place great? And certainly the current workforce and educating them on what opportunities are available for them in order to perhaps switch jobs or reskill. And here's just a couple examples. Ramsey County this is where St. Paul is, in Minneapolis, St. Paul area in Minnesota, doing workforce summits to be able to bring people together to educate them. You guys might be having events like that in your own communities. Seven Rivers Alliance in Wisconsin, they do a state of the region each year where they have a whole half-day conference, just bringing everybody in to educate them on what the latest pieces were. This one happened to be all in artificial intelligence. York County Development Corporation, just a long-time client of ours. Lisa Hurley there has the 17 county podcast where she interviews people. And this is great. She's on episode 117 already, has been keeping it going for a long time. It's well listened to. And it's a great way to educate people, give people a bunch of different mediums to be able to get that information. I mentioned Golden Shovel does this. These are our white papers. We've been, for the last few years, been putting out a white paper at least every quarter. All of these are available for free to download and to learn on a whole variety of different types of topics. Like we just did one on childcare shortages. We did one on tourism. We came out with one on rural communities yesterday. So by all means, feel free to get all of those and read them. And this is how we kind of present them. I love to put a QR code on there, especially if you're doing a presentation to a group. It's a lot easier to grab that than typing in a URL. And then the next big trend is AI integration. We're just at the beginning of this. You've probably seen some of these players in the news recently. I've never seen anything move quite so fast. They say that the rate of change is doubling right now every 4 months. And so we're seeing all sorts of new tools come out. We're participating in those. Wanted to share a few of those that might apply for your website. Most importantly, AI is being defined as one of the key technologies, along with it's going to be artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. It'll be at the same level as language, agriculture, and writing as far as its effect on humans. And so this is very exciting and something definitely to keep tabs on. You might be familiar with ChatGPT. Just starting there, you can use ChatGPT to evaluate your website. You can use it to review the content, make recommendations on how to improve it. So that's a really interesting use of that. Google has a tool called Notebook LM. And this is really, if you have a Google account, you can log in with it. They have both a free version and a paid version. If you have a business one, I believe it's included. This has a really interesting tool in it I wanted to share with you guys, especially under just getting out of that education piece. We were doing solving workforce shortages. So I uploaded, for an example, you can put whatever sources you want into Notebook LM, and then you can use it to ask questions against those sources. Or in this case, you can generate a podcast. So it's a new way to take it. So I put in a 30-page ebook on solving workforce shortages and hit, please make this into a podcast. And it made it into a podcast with 2 different voices. I'll just play a few seconds of it here for you so you can hear it.
Deep dive. Today, we're diving into workforce shortages.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Why are businesses having so much trouble hiring people?
Right.
And what can communities actually do about it?
Yeah, it's a big question.
We've got a ton of research and reports to go through.
We do.
One that really stood out to me was this white paper from the Golden Shovel Agency.
Oh, yeah?
They're a national economic development firm, and they've really, dug deep into this problem.
Yeah, they've come up with some really interesting solutions, very practical stuff that communities can actually use.
It's like they've handed us a welcome to the deep dive.
So that's just a teeny little clip of this. It's 30 minutes long. 2 people talking about every single case study and every little piece that happened to be into this white paper. And I'm not presenting it as necessarily using our white papers and converting them into audio, but think about it as a way for your own organization to give people other ways to take in the content. So if you're going to put a white paper out onto your website, why not also generate a audio version of the same thing so somebody could listen to it and learn it that way. Some people, it's just easier to listen to everything you have to share in a car versus reading it.
Actually, could I just jump in on that? I just think that is such a good use of it. I know we're all so busy, and I love the idea of I have something I want to get through and I just haven't had time, and turn it into a podcast that I can listen to or digest on the car, on a plane, waiting, whatever it actually is. One of the things that I really thought was interesting about Notebook LM isn't necessarily just to use it as the podcast itself, but because it will generate a podcast and a transcript, use your own voices. You've got everything prepared for you here. You can go into it, but there's no reason you can't actually just record something. Also using the voices of the people in your organization. So it isn't always just like a literal take it from there, rip it off and use it, but there are so many interesting ways you can use this.
And this particular one, I mean, this generated a two-person podcast in minutes, but you can also you can interject yourself and make yourself a part of it with the AI hosts.
Love it.
It's getting crazy. Here's another tool. Once again, these slides will be available to share. It's called Grammarly. This is just, we use it internally for helping and redo, making sure that grammar is done properly, that there aren't any misspellings. It's been a really nice tool we've used ourselves. HeyGen is a crazy one where you can upload a video of yourself and it can make a digitized avatar that then you can use to share your content yet another way. So instead of just having it be on text, you could perhaps have yourself reading it. You could also use one of their pre-generated avatars. I made a little clip of myself speaking in multiple different languages. I can show you one sec. Oh, I just went to it. Okay, I'll see if, watch this.
Talk about AI. I'd be remiss if I didn't include an AI version of myself. Frankly, I think I am better at speaking than the other guy since I don't have any vocal utterances and don't make mistakes. On that note, through HeyGen, I can speak in multiple languages, whereas the real Aaron can barely manage with a little German. For example, let us start in English. Thank you all for coming here to learn more about AI. I hope you find it interesting. In German, I would say, vielen Dank, dass Sie alle hierher gekommen sind, mehr über KI zu erfahren. Ich hoffe, Sie finden es interessant. Let's try Spanish. Gracias a todos por venir aquí para aprender más sobre IA. Espero que les resulte interesante. Or perhaps Korean. AI에 대해 더 알아보기 위해 여기 와주신 모든 분들께 감사드립니다.
So you get an idea that you can actually present yourself reading in different languages, even if you don't know the language. If you have a bilingual communities and you want to be able to get messages sent across, you can translate them in HeyGen and then have yourself read them fluently. I'm going to keep moving because we're running short on time. So
talk about AI.
I want to talk a little bit about graphics using AI since websites are so image heavy. There's a variety of different tools you can use. Gigapixel AI allows you to upscale images. So if you have lower scale or historical images sometimes that might not be big enough, this will increase it up to 600%, which is really, really impressive for use. You can also generate images through AI. So here's just an example of using ChatGPT. Create a dramatic photo of a businesswoman surveying a construction site. She has on a professional white blazer and a construction helmet. If you don't quite like the one you see, you can ask it to do alternates or even have different styles, like make this image in watercolor and the woman's wearing a VR headset. And here she is in a style of an animated feature film. So you can make these different styles. And once you've got the style that you like, it'll remember that. You can say, hey, use this exact same style. I like this watercolor look, but make this type of image, this type of image, this type of image. You can have some consistency in the branding of the images that you're trying to create if you're doing a campaign of sorts. It used to be that all AI images are not copyrightable. That law just changed. So now they are if you edit them. So if they're edited in any way to your own needs, then now they're copyrightable, which is interesting. Also, if you're Photoshop users inside working on websites and you don't have the right shape photo or size photo, there's AI that can generate that too. Here's a picture of myself from Select USA, and I can use Photoshop to fill in the rest of the remaining image, and it'll give you actually 3 different options each time you do it, and then you can pick one to maybe use on a site.
Yeah, so interesting questions about AI. And obviously, there's things that we need to think about as public-private partnerships or organizations representing your region. You, of course, need to really think about security and data compliance. So we've learned a lot about DeepSeek and, some of the very big concerns that people have there. That's not the only one. You need to think about what files, information, and data you're using with any external AI tool, and you need to know what your organization's or specific guidelines and policies are before you use them. The other caution I would give you with AI is just to think about using it not to do your job, obviously, but to do your job better, the things that you want to do. So more, faster, more efficient, more effectively, but really they need to be used thoughtfully and for the right reasons. So if you're using it to come up to do research or whatever, or to generate a text that you might use in a podcast, I think it's really important then to think about putting yourself in there. When you use AI, you really want to think about your AI persona. Define what it is, explain who you are, what your position is, what organization you're working for, and thinking about what your objectives are in any output that you have there. So that avoids the kind of typical flat results, errors, or lack of authenticity that you might have if you haven't refined it. Next, you really want to define your audience. So who are you going to be speaking to? You want to make sure that we have language and terms and context that is meaningful to the folks who will be hearing it, seeing it, or reading it. And so defining your audience in the prompt is also really important. Next, I think it's really important to be upfront about using AI. So one of the examples you gave us there, where you could translate anything that you're speaking in a video to different languages, was used by a mayor to translate a message to multiple different languages for people in their community. And when this person went out, people would come up and start speaking to him in Punjabi or whatever, and he wasn't able to respond because obviously he didn't know how to speak those languages. So simply, that seems very inauthentic. Putting a little note on the video saying, this was translated using an AI language generator, totally upfront, and I think that would avoid some of the pitfalls. And last, and probably most important, verify, verify, verify. So whatever results you get, look at it very closely. It can make mistakes. I've seen AIs pull up like makeup citations that don't actually exist. And then I would go back and edit to make sure it sounds like you, it sounds like your organization, it sounds like your voice. So you want to make sure that you avoid those errors and any inherent biases, and ultimately the final output should have been human qualified. I think that's really critical. As you know, there's a lot of inaccuracies that we've talked about. So one of them is called hallucinations, which observes a non-existent pattern or patterns that are imperceptible to humans. So sometimes that's presented as fact when we know, in fact, it's not. And then the concept of the uncanny valley, and you can see the AI is not so good at hands, not so good at teeth, as you can see here. I think it is actually getting better since some of these early pictures, but this idea where it's like really creepy because you look at an image and maybe you don't necessarily understand why, but there's something wrong here that doesn't fit with our expectations or understanding of the actual physical world. So just being aware that there are some pitfalls in there.
Yes.
And I just thought this was a really interesting thing to think about, that when our technical skills are eclipsed, our humanity will matter more than ever. So as we strive for authenticity and legitimacy and credibility in our organizations, public face and marketing, we really want to make sure that we maintain it by having that human element still there, still vetting final products, still being the one who determines how things should be structured and presented.
I really love this quote. That's great. And that's really the goal. With Golden Shovel, we've been exploring all sorts of AI for all the right reasons, trying to make the lives easier of economic developers and ourselves. And like, for example, here's just a couple of things we've put in. We made an SEO tool, for example, that would generate the SEO descriptions for all of the pages. And then we could just click accept once it's been generated or edit it. Like Elisa said, you do not just use anything as is. You have to look at it and read it. Otherwise, it does make mistakes. And so we've set up that way so that we can do a lot more in a lot less time to make the sites more effective. Another thing we built in our admin side is the Gateway AI Assistant. This is built out of ChatGPT, and making it so that we've got a tool inside the admin that any time you can get some additional information. I just happen to put what are the 10 leading employers in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Please provide descriptions, and you can always ask it for sources. In fact, always ask it for sources, because then it'll give you the sources. You can go click on them and double check. Sometimes some of the early training data is just out of date and the sites will no longer be working. But you can generate that stuff in the admin. You can also use these admin assistants for things like hey, what is this what does this CSS code mean? And how can I use it to edit the background color? Or like, where should I upload this or put this in this website? And it'll make recommendations. Super cool stuff. And we have a brand new product that I'm not here to show off today, but we did launch it just this month. We've made a new tool called Impact Local. It's a new website product for rural communities and neighborhoods and downtown associations, just groups that need the same kind of power that we've been able to generate out of our larger economic development sites, but for smaller audiences and for a lower budget. So by all means, talk to us about that. And it does have AI integrated into it so that we can generate it much faster than we were able to before. The next thing, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it has a huge impact still, is video and using video inside economic development websites. And more than ever, video's got a big SEO component. It really affects the sites that are found. Google puts a big emphasis on if you have video. You can even showed some examples in the AI side of how you could use videos to add them to even like a news article or a white paper or something to make it even more impressionable. But videos just in general are such a great way to tell the story. And we have our client, here's York County again. They've got tons of videos. Lots of our clients have video now, and putting it on the websites and making it accessible is a great way for people to tell the story. Here's one about the Carvers. This is a talent attraction. So you see these guys living it up in York County Development Corporation and think, you know what, I could see myself there with my family. Different types of videos we've been doing across the board, including the 360 ones we've done in VR, where you can look around a spherical video and really capture this ability to feel like you're there. Lots of aerial drone video, certainly get the best perspectives on the community from up there, and then using them for tours of sites and yeah, various renderings of the sort. So, well, and then of course, tourism is a great way for video. Here's just a teeny clip of an example of a video he did for Chippewa, Wisconsin. I'm going to turn the audio off on it, but you can do so many visualizations with the video to not just capture it, but show off all the key points that you're trying to make about a specific site, how it might be available, where it is in location to other parts of the country, where it might be as far as next to population centers or universities, and just a really effective way to do that. So I'm going to just leave that in here and we'll move on to the next, which is visualization. And this plays a similar role to, there's different types of visualization, but it's so important for the storytelling. If you remember like the One East Kentucky example with the dots of like, hey, this is an aerospace hub, even though there's not an aerospace company here yet, you can make that case using visualizations.
Yeah, just again, the idea that our brains can assimilate information from long lists of data, spreadsheets, and then visualizing things. There's so many different great tools out there. And I see that there was a question also for smaller communities. There's some fantastic options. They do the data visualization for you. They bring the data. They can sometimes use your local data as well. So some examples would be FT Location Zoom Prospector tool, their intelligence components. Local Intel has some fantastic tools, such as the one up there on the top left. You can also do some data visualizations on your own, as you see in the infographic that I created on the bottom left. Take the data from other places and use things like Canva, for example. You don't need to be a designer to use Canva to put something like that together so you can still communicate things quickly and effectively.
Yep, you bet. We are getting close to the top of our hour, so I think we're just going to go on a little longer. Feel free to stick around if for whatever reason you have to take off early. By all means, this entire webinar will be recorded and available to watch if you missed the end of it. So there's just little too much, too much to share.
We do have a lot.
Here's an example of some other types of renderings you can do, where you could take for example, a greenfield site like we all have in our backyards, and then show how a facility could go right on that. Just show you a couple of these. I'm not going to do too much, but this has been this is a one in Eastern Kentucky showing a mine and how they could actually have a rail service provided with a short spur right to an advanced manufacturing facility. There's the original site. I'm going to show how some of these move along. So I'm going to keep moving. Talked a little bit about the VR. Matterport, if you're familiar with this, I've seen quite a bit of it in residential real estate, but it's very effective in commercial real estate also for shoring off a facility. What's neat about this is you go through an entire facility every 10 feet with a camera that shoots and turns it all into a 3D model. And here's an example of one. It actually goes into the facility, and a person from afar can walk through the whole thing, and it's so accurate that you can actually make measurements to decide if it might be a good fit for what you might be doing next. So I've been using that for existing facilities and using visualizations for ones that don't exist yet. That gets us into workforce development. Number 3. We've seen, as far as the workforce development is becoming more of a focus than ever, trying to get the people that are inside your community to take the jobs that are going to be needed. The talent war has never been stronger. There's not as many jobs available as there used to be. And so this has become really, really important. So I want to give you a couple examples of some people that have done a great job. You can check them out. This is West Central Works. This was a project from the Momentum West group. It was 10-county region from Western Wisconsin. They had a fair number of layoffs that were happening. They wanted to make sure that that all the workers that were displaced could get retrained, and they built an entire site dedicated to that, just for that retraining. It was very successful, and it had a whole inbound marketing piece that went along with it, and that tied in, had hundreds of thousands of impressions and clicks, and got people into the community to get access to all the programs for reskilling and retraining. Clark County Jobs, this is from Greater Springfield, Ohio area. And Clark County, what they did with theirs, this is a fantastic site. By all means, please check it out. They did a whole series of videos that were just people doing the jobs that they had available that were inside their community, and talk about storytelling. Some of these people would talk about how they never had dreamed that they would have this job. They've been doing it for this many years, and that they just are so proud and are growing and excited about the company. The whole idea of this is to introduce particularly high school students or people looking for new careers about that possibility. And of course, using video, really you hear the passion in their voice and their excitement and what they're up to. We did this also in in Shelby County, Kentucky. We made 360 videos, and the students could come and actually see what it's like to be on the plant floor of the leading employers. You know, it's funny, these students drive by these plants every single day on their way to school. They have no idea what it's like inside, and they assume it's just this like Henry Ford in there with some kind of dirty old manufacturing place, when really they're so high tech. And using the VR headsets and bringing those to the job fairs introduce the students to their companies and to the jobs that are available, versus trying to move all the students over to the company to actually see it in person. It was a way to bring the company to the schools. That was very successful and very exciting for the students that experienced it. And that leads us into talent attraction. So there's the workforce development, but then there's the talent attraction itself. And most of the successful talent attraction campaigns that we've been working on have set up a dedicated site that was for talent, so they could have the strongest first impression and not blend it with trying to do the business attraction work. And they'll really focus in on what jobs are available in that area. This one happens to be Broken Arrow. Here's, you can go find the careers and see what might be there. Bismarck Mandan, North Dakota, did a whole campaign called Make Your Mark on Bismarck. And they, inside their websites, relocation resources, start your business, explore housing options. Here's apprenticeships and internships, finding a school, finding a job, kind of really curating all the content towards living there and working there. And of course, sharing all of those success stories. The most effective. Oh, hey, this was just from today. I saw. I decided to throw it in the presentation. I moved from California to a tiny town in Kansas where I bought my first home and feel like I'm finally winning at life. This was a perfect example of an economic development talent attraction story. And I read the article, and they were in a garage, living in the garage in California because they couldn't even afford a one bedroom apartment. And then finally getting to Kansas and being like, wow, we have a house, we're getting somewhere, we have some land, this is exciting. And sharing that story. Now, that's a story that could be marketed to other people that might be in the same situation as they are, perhaps in the Bay Area of California.
Definitely.
Yep. Sharing some videos. This is in Yankton. Here's an entrepreneur, and he talks about why he loves having his business there, the programs he took advantage of, the supportive environment. Once again, video, photos, the whole story written out right there. And one thing I like that Yankton does that's super creative, they have every March, they highlight one person every single day that's is the 31 under 31, 31 days. And they have somebody that's under 31 that's living in the area and talks about their family, interviews them, hears about their job. And then each one of these becomes content for that person to be able to share out to their friends and family. And it really has been successful. That's why you saw such a large following of their Facebook pages earlier on. And then on the 31st day, they do one person that's been there for over 31 years, talking about why they've been there their whole time. It's really, I think, a cool way to get the word out through the people that you're already thriving in the community. We had a similar campaign for Love Montgomery County, Kansas. This was great. But this is where it really gets down to the rubber meets the road, is that if you really want to attract talent, you can tell them all day long that it's great to live there, but everyone's doing the same thing. What you need to do is give them an incentive. And so if you have a community that really wants to attract talent, it's really important to get resources to offer to people to move. And we're seeing all sorts of things. Like, look at this pay off student loans, free money, for crying out loud, down there. One of the links. Down payment money for your home, being able to get incentives for moving. Some of the groups we've seen have paid for student loans. These have been really successful. People not only click on them when they're like, hey, by the way, you can get this much money, but then some of them take advantage of it, and they've had multiple families move to the area. We had another one with Devil's Lake Economic Development, and they offered to pay down student loans. So if you have a bunch of student loans, what a nice way to get a fresh start in Devil's Lake. You can move there, they'll take care of it. They worked with the businesses to set up the program, and basically you get $24,000 of your student loans paid off, but you have to stay there for 5 years. So if they pay it off, but it's over those 5 years, so that you're not just taking the $24,000 and running. You got to invest yourself into their community. But it works. Okay, we're at our last one. User experience. I'll pass it over to you.
Just to remember that it's often important for us to take off our hat as economic developers and put on the hats of the users that we are targeting with our websites and take a fresh look. Imagine you are a site selector or a business making a location decision, or a local business deciding whether to stay or move, or perhaps a worker looking and considering a location or looking for another way to change their skill set. Is the website easy to find? Do the right terms that regular people use with organic language, does that bring the website up? Does the website load quickly? If it doesn't load quickly, both on your phone and on your computer, then after a couple seconds, people are just going to leave. Is it visually pleasing? That's important too. When they come to the website, does it look like it's circa 2011, or does it look like fresh and clean, enough white space, good, composition, good photos or videos, and copy as well? Is the information correct? Are there any typos or errors? Is it up to date, or is it clearly using, referencing information that is out of date or more than a couple years old? Is this site easy to navigate? I just spent time on hundreds of economic development websites, and so many of them feel like scavenger hunts. People should be able to see your contact information, your email address, ideally not just info@youredo.com, Actually, the email addresses for real people with their names, maybe even a picture of them, links to LinkedIn profiles, so that people are able to quickly and easily navigate. Use blind testing. This is something I often do for clients. Come up with the 5 tasks you think that website visitors should be able to do on your website, and watch someone else come onto the website without any direction from you. See if they can quickly and easily find their way around to those to complete those 5 tasks. Um, are there interactive elements? The interactivity is such an important thing, that they can answer their own questions with interactive data tools. And are there reasons for them to come back to your website? These are some of the things you want to think about. So remember the user and don't just think about it from your own perspective. These are examples from different tools. I think this is from Grapevine, Texas. So using infographics, again, you could just see by clicking on the icons at the top, by the headers over there at the top, that you can move around quickly to navigate to the different things that you want to see on the
Yep,
site.
these are really cool. They're interactive. It's with the FT locations and the Zoom Prospector tools. They have the ability to uh, move and interact with them right on. They're not static graphics. You can adjust them. It's really fun.
And the data updates automatically in the back end. So you can always trust that you've got the correct, most up-to-date data. Same with here on Volusia, you can see another example from FT Locations. This is Zoom Prospector, heat mapping data. All the data is always reliable, it's visual, and it's up to date.
Yep.
Another example, this is Zoom Prospector from the state of Indiana. You could just see that the search is very simple. It's very intuitive, easy to find the different things that you're looking for so that you can get that information, and it updates in real time to look for the information you need.
Yeah, and these tools for property, especially because property's got so much going on with it when you're looking for a specific site, these are a really well organized way to display it. This one's Carver County. This is this is an interactive mapping tool that we have at Golden Shovel. We can customize it however we want. We've used these maps for a whole variety of different types of storytelling and making navigational tools for people to find this information. This one happens to be around living in the area. So farmers markets, restaurants, breweries, lodging, you can click on any of these links or dots or turn these layers on and off and then go and visit those businesses. And we built other custom tools for like Ramsey County, where they wanted to have all the incentives that were available just for inside specific boundaries that you could then search them. So not only can you go into this map and see what incentives might be there, but then it shows the results below so that you could take advantage of those programs. And another one that we've seen in action and have a whole variety of clients using for small businesses is SizeUp. And excellent tool. They've basically taken all of the information and data that would used to be in just the hands of large consultancies and made it available for economic developers to be able to give to this community so that the small businesses can run a bunch of intelligence on what they may want to need to know for opening their business. It's got all levels of everything from what are people's salaries like, to what's the insurance like, to what is the employment, what's the traffic like, goes on and on. A super impressive tool. And only going 15 minutes over, we've made it to the end. You know what? At least the next year it's doing this for an hour and a half.
I think that's probably true. We just have so much great stuff to share with people. So yes, thank you for sticking with us. I see most of you have, so that is very much appreciated.
Here's our contact information. By all means, feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We'll make sure to send out this entire presentation so you can review any of the examples that we gave, of which I know there were a lot. So thank you for joining us today.
We do have a couple of questions if you guys have a few minutes extra.
Why not? Let's do it.
Sure, why not?
First, in regards to data visualization, what apps do you suggest or find to be the easiest to use for smaller EDO teams?
So actually, I think I addressed that at one point during the presentation because I did see the question. There are a number of vendors out there who do that, but if you're a smaller team, the idea would be to take advantage of someone who brings the data to you, easy to implement, easy to integrate into a website. It's very cost effective. A great example would be FT Location, Zoom Prospector tool. We showed you some example of that. Local Intel also has some fantastic tools. Size Up was another one that you saw for small business support. Again, this takes literally, they're affordable. They don't scaled usually for population, very easy to integrate.
Thank you.
Sounds like a good answer to me.
I agree. Where do you recommend finding the individuals for these promotional videos? Do you go to the business first?
Oh, well, depending on what your goal is, of course, that would depend on where you would start. If you're looking to attracting businesses, then certainly you start there. If you're working with a business that's trying to attract talent, then you still would also go to the business first because you'd want to have your stories be of the people thriving at the company that you're then going to use to share their trades with the community. We can go to universities to find talent to do that type of thing. But usually we'll start with the businesses. We've worked with the workforce development boards on quite a few occasions. Sometimes you can even just working through the chambers that are, be able to find people that are willing to share their story. Worst case scenario, if you don't have anybody, then you can use one of the pre-generated humans from HeyGen and type in whatever you want and they'll say it.
I also think like there's a lot of tolerance for people just handheld, get a decent tripod off, any online site. Um, People have this tolerance for iPhone and smartphone shot video. You could go it feels really authentic. You'd have to contact the businesses and see if that, that's something that you can do. Most people are really flattered and excited to be approached. So it's a nice way for you also to do these like, face-to-face interactions with businesses. You could put out a call in the Facebook group maybe that you've set up for your community or your LinkedIn group for businesses in your community. Use this as an opportunity to expand your connections. And yes, there are some fantastic, talented video producers out there, but if you just want to do quick, short things and taking out, your own phone, having a steady hand, and asking people a couple questions is a really nice way to start.
Great. One more question. It's a bit of a loaded question. Great ideas, but can be a challenge to not make all 10 ideas become siloed apart from each other. How can an EDO weave all 10 trends and concepts together?
Well, in a funny way, actually, after reviewing the 10, I think they are somewhat weaved together
Yeah.
already. You can't, the visualization is part of the storytelling. The videos are all part of the storytelling and the value propositions. Um, I feel like the various trends are they're not apples to apples comparisons because it's not like there's one thing to have an interactive tool and there's another thing to go after talent attraction. So in a way, these are all just components of doing the same thing, ultimately telling that story. And
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
yep.
I agree also because we led with value proposition. So if you're starting off by really understanding the nitty-gritty of the messaging that your community has to offer and that you need to get out there, then being able to integrate all these things together, picking and choosing the things that are most important, that complement, dovetail, reinforce those messages and your brand value, then actually ideally, if done well, all of this should come together. And it doesn't mean that every single community is going to have to check them off separately. You have to do it in a way that's meaningful and that resonates with the value proposition in your own strategic plan. But I do think that if you pick, there's some talented vendors out there, an excellent website company like Golden Shovel is going to be able to help you to do those kinds of things as you're putting together your website and thinking about your marketing. Part of my job as a digital marketing strategist is almost like to be the general contractor of the marketing world and help make sure, oversee the big picture and help you figure out what are the things that you need to do and who are the fantastic service providers and vendors out there that can help you achieve that.
Yep. I would support that too. You have to have the value proposition before you can tell the story. Otherwise, you don't know what type of stories to tell. You can't educate people unless you're educating them in alignment with those values, and all the other tools follow behind that. So So maybe we had our whole list upside down. Maybe it should have been 1 to 10 instead of 10 to 1, but they are all absolutely related.
Excellent. Thank you. So much fun doing this again, and I look forward to next year, which will make us an even dozen.
All right,
Thank you
real
both for being
good.
here, and thanks for all the participants for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.